When you put on the badge, you know the risks. You know that every call, every shift could be the one that changes everything. But nothing prepares you for betrayal, not from the streets you protect, and certainly not from the people you trust the most. For officers, Daniel Hayes and Maria Lopez, one decision, one ambush, would test their courage, their loyalty, and their will to survive. This is their story, a story of survival, betrayal, and the fight for justice in the face of impossible odds. Before we dive into today's story, let us know in the comments where in the world are you watching this video from. We'd love to hear from you. It was just another Monday morning in the city, a quiet one for a change. The streets seemed peaceful, almost serene. But for Officer Daniel Hayes, peace was never something he trusted. In law enforcement, quiet mornings could sometimes be deceiving. They often masked the chaos brewing just out of sight, waiting to strike when you least expected it. For the past 5 years, Daniel had served as a patrol officer, walking the fine line between protecting his community and keeping himself alive. He wasn't a rookie anymore. He had seen things, been through things that left scars no one else could see. But even after all these years, he still carried the weight of every call, every choice, every life he couldn't save. His partner, Maria Lopez, was the perfect counterbalance. Sharp-witted and fearless, Maria brought a fire to the job that Daniel sometimes envied. Together, they had built a bond forged in trust, danger, and the unspoken understanding that every shift could be their last. Daniel, smirking. "And not everything's a joke, Lopez." They exchange a laugh, a moment of levity between partners who've seen too much. Outside, the morning sun is climbing higher, casting long shadows over the precinct parking lot. It wasn't unusual for Daniel to start the day with a sense of unease. Maybe it was intuition, or maybe it was just years of experience telling him that calm mornings rarely stayed that way for long. But today, the feeling was stronger. Something about the stillness in the air didn't sit right with him. He couldn't shake it, even as he tried to convince himself it was just another routine Monday. "Maria, you know, for all your brooding haze, I think this city's actually looking up. Crime's down in our district, people are keeping their heads down. Maybe we're finally making a difference." Daniel, shaking his head, smirking. "Don't get too comfortable, Lopez. The minute you let your guard down is the minute the city reminds you who's really in charge." Maria, laughing. "Okay, Captain Doom and Gloom, I'll try to stay paranoid like you." They both laugh, but Daniel's expression grows slightly more serious as he glances out the window, scanning the streets instinctively. The tension in his shoulders never fully relaxes. For Daniel, patrolling the streets was more than just a job. It was a promise to his family, to his community, to himself. He had taken an oath to protect and serve, knowing full well the cost that promise could demand, and though he would never admit it, the weight of that promise sometimes felt unbearable, but he carried it anyway, because someone had to. Dispatcher, voice through the radio. "Unit 12, we've got a report of a suspicious vehicle parked in the 700 block of Palmer Street. Black van, tinted windows, possible illegal activity. Proceed with caution." Daniel told "Copy that. Dispatch, Unit 12 en route." It sounded routine, a suspicious vehicle, an anonymous tip. Calls like this happened every day. 99% of the time, it turned out to be nothing. But that 1%? That 1% was what kept officers like Daniel and Maria on edge, because sometimes what seemed like nothing turned out to be everything. Maria told, "This feels off." Daniel told, "Yay, stay sharp." The camera slowly zooms in on the van as Daniel and Maria step out of the patrol car. Their hands hover near their holsters as they approach cautiously. The sense of dread builds, the music growing tense, hinting at the danger lurking just out of sight. What Daniel and Maria didn't know was that the van wasn't just a lead, it was bait. a trap meticulously set for them, and by the time they realized it, it would already be too late. The moment they turned into the alley, Daniel felt it, that gut instinct every cop learns to trust. Something about the scene didn't sit right. The van looked too perfectly positioned, like it had been waiting for them. The silence hanging over the alley felt unnatural, oppressive. It was the kind of quiet that made your skin crawl, the kind that warned you something wasn't right. Maria told, "You feel that?" Daniel nodding. "Yeah, doesn't feel like a routine call." Officers are trained to approach every situation with caution, but caution wasn't enough to silence Daniel's growing unease. He couldn't explain it, but something about this call felt deliberate, like they were being drawn into a trap. But as an officer, hesitation wasn't an option. They had a job to do, and they had no choice but to move forward. Daniel told out, "This is the police. Is anyone in the vehicle? Step out with your hands where we can see them." The only response is silence. Daniel's voice echoes off the alley walls, but there's no movement from the van. Maria peering into the driver's side window. "I don't see anyone. Windows are tinted. Can't make out much." Daniel, "Stay sharp. Could still be someone inside." Every instinct told Daniel to wait, to call for backup and assess the situation from a distance. But sometimes instincts had to take a back seat to duty. If there was someone inside the van, someone in danger or up to no good, waiting could mean the difference between life and death. And so, with a deep breath, Daniel made his move. Daniel told, "It's empty." Maria told, "Looks like another false alarm. Could have been abandoned here." But just as they started to let their guard down, the quiet was shattered. The sound of footsteps, quick, deliberate, echoed from the far end of the alley. Both officers froze, their training kicking in instantly. Flashlights swung toward the noise, illuminating a figure darting into the shadows. Maria told, "Did you see that?" Daniel told, "Yeah, someone's here." The van wasn't the problem, it was the bait, and now the officers were walking straight into the trap. But there was no turning back. They had to follow the figure, had to find out who or what was waiting for them at the end of the alley. They couldn't ignore the possibility that someone needed their help, even if it meant stepping into the unknown. Maria told, "Great, a creepy warehouse. This just keeps getting better." Daniel told, "Stay close. We don't know what we're walking into." Inside the warehouse, the tension was suffocating. Every step felt heavier, every sound sharper. Daniel and Maria swept their flashlights across the room, searching for any sign of the figure they had followed, but all they found was darkness and silence. It was as if the shadows themselves were watching, waiting. Maria told, "Did you hear that?" Daniel told, "Yay, someone's here." They weren't alone, and whoever had led them here wasn't done yet. The trap was about to spring, and neither Daniel nor Maria had any idea how close they were to the danger lurking just out of sight. The warehouse was a maze of shadows and silence, every corner hiding the potential for danger. For Daniel and Maria, their training told them to stay calm, to stay focused. But even the best training couldn't silence the feeling creeping into their minds that they were being watched, that they weren't alone. Maria whispering, "They're trying to lead us deeper in." Daniel nodding, "Stay alert, don't get separated." The figure they had chased into the warehouse was nowhere to be seen, but the sounds of movement seemed to come from everywhere at once. A faint rustling here, a distant clang there. It was as if the shadows themselves were alive, guiding them further into the trap. Maria whispering, "Something's here." The camera cuts back to Daniel, who hears her whisper and turns toward her direction. But before he can say anything, the sound of shattering glass pierces the silence. Both officers spin around, their weapons drawn as something crashes to the floor in the distance. And then it happened, the first crack in the stillness. The sound of shattering glass echoed through the warehouse, reverberating off the walls like a warning. It was the moment the quiet gave way to chaos. Maria, yelling, "It's an ambush." Daniel told, "Stay down, call for backup." Maria told, "Unit 12 requesting immediate backup." "Officer under fire. Abandon the warehouse at Palmer Street. Repeat, we're under fire." The trap had been set, and now it was springing shut. Daniel and Maria were outnumbered and outgunned, pinned down in a deadly game of survival. The ambush was no accident. This was planned, deliberate. Someone wanted them here. Someone wanted them dead. Daniel, gritting his teeth. "They're trying to box us in. We've got to move." Maria, nodding. "Where? They've got us pinned." The attackers weren't amateurs. Their movements were coordinated, their fire precise. They had planned every detail, from the van to the warehouse, drawing Daniel and Maria into a trap they weren't meant to escape. Daniel told, "There! We can fall back through that gap. We need to get out of this kill zone." Maria told, "Cover me." Every step was a gamble, every decision a desperate attempt to stay alive. But the attackers weren't letting up. They were relentless, determined to finish what they had started. And as Daniel and Maria fell back deeper into the warehouse, one thing became clear. This wasn't just about survival, this was personal. Maria told, "They're hurting us. They're not just trying to kill us, they're pushing us somewhere." Daniel told, "Yay, question is, where?" It was a terrifying realization. The attackers weren't just hunting them, they were guiding them. For Daniel and Maria, every step deeper into the warehouse was a step closer to whatever endgame their enemies had planned. Maria told, "We're sitting ducks here." Daniel lintled, "There's got to be another way out. Keep them busy." Daniel told, "There. If we can get to the second floor, we might find an exit." The ambush was relentless, a deadly storm of gunfire and shadows, but Daniel and Maria weren't ready to give up. They had faced danger before, and they weren't about to let fear take over now. They had one goal: survive, and if they were going down, they were going down fighting. The attackers weren't done yet, and as the warehouse began to collapse around them, Daniel and Maria realized the trap was far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. The fight for survival was just beginning. The explosion was deafening, a sudden violent burst of chaos that left Daniel and Maria stunned. For a moment, everything felt distant, the sounds of gunfire, the shouts of their attackers, even the pounding of their own hearts. But as the dust settled and the ringing in their ears faded, reality came crashing back. They were still alive, for now. Daniel told, "Maria, you okay?" Maria told, "Been better. What the hell was that?" Daniel told, "They're not just trying to pin us down, they're trying to bury us alive." The explosion wasn't an accident. It was a calculated move designed to corner them, weaken them, and force them into submission. The attackers weren't just out for blood, they wanted total control of the situation, and Daniel knew they couldn't afford to give it to them. Daniel told, "We have to move, now." Maria told, "Where? They've got us surrounded." Danny told, "Then we fight our way out. We don't have a choice." Pinned down, injured and outnumbered, retreat wasn't an option. Running would only make them easier targets. If they wanted to survive, they had to stand their ground, together. Maria told, "Well, partner, this is one hell of a Monday." Daniel told, "I told you not to jinx it." The warehouse had become a battlefield, every corner a potential death trap. Daniel and Maria fought with everything they had, their training and instincts the only thing keeping them alive. But with every passing second, their odds of survival grew slimmer. Daniel told, "There. The elevator, we can use it to get to the roof. Might be a way out from up there." Maria told, "If it even works." Daniel told, "It's better than staying here. Cover me. I'll check it out." Daniel told, "It works. Let's go." It was a gamble, a desperate move in a desperate situation. The elevator was old, barely functional, but it was their only chance to escape the death trap closing in around them. Daniel and Maria had no time to hesitate. The attackers weren't letting up. They fired relentlessly, determined to stop the officers from escaping. But Danielle and Maria weren't giving up. Not now. They had come too far, fought too hard, to let this be the end. Maria told, "If this thing gives out halfway up, we're screwed." Daniel told, "I didn't plan on dying in a rusty elevator today, just hang on." Daniel, "They're trying to cut us off. We need to be ready when we hit the roof." Maria told, "Just tell me you've got a plan." There wasn't much of a plan, only survival. Daniel and Maria knew they were running out of time, running out of options. The attackers were relentless, and the only thing standing between them and the end was their will to keep fighting. Maria told, "No way down from here except the way we came." Daniel, "Then we make our stand. We hold them off until backup gets here." Cornered, injured, and outnumbered, Daniel and Maria had no choice but to fight. The rooftop became their last stand, a desperate struggle for survival with no guarantees. But in that moment, they weren't just fighting for their lives, they were fighting for each other, for the promise they had made to protect and serve, no matter the cost. The fight was over, but the cost was clear. The rooftop was a battlefield, and Daniel Hayes lay at its center, struggling to hold on. His vision blurred, his breathing shallow as he fought against the pain. Nearby, Maria Lopez knelt beside him, clutching her own injured shoulder, her face a mix of anguish and determination. They had survived, but just barely. Maria told, "Stay with me, Daniel. Backup's on the way. Just hang in there, okay?" Daniel told, We made it." Maria, shaking her head, "Not yet. Don't you dare give up on me now." The cavalry had arrived, but for Daniel and Maria, the nightmare wasn't over. The ambush had left its mark, not just on their bodies, but on their trust in everything they thought they knew. Because as the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, one thing became clear. This wasn't just a random attack, it was something far more sinister. Maria told, "Hey, welcome back." Daniel told, "Are we alive, or is this some kind of bad dream?" Maria told, "Alive, barely. You scared the hell out of me, though." Maria told, "Daniel, we need to talk about what happened." The ambush had been brutal, but it was the questions left in its wake that cut even deeper. As Daniel fought to stay awake, Maria pieced together what they had seen, what they had heard, and the more she thought about it, the more uneasy she became. Maria told, "They weren't just some random gang, Daniel. Those guys, they were professionals. They knew exactly where we'd be, when we'd be there. This wasn't just some setup. Someone gave them our location." Daniel told, "You're saying someone on the inside?" Maria told, "It has to be." Think about it. The van, the warehouse, the ambush, it was too perfect, too precise. Someone sold us out. The realization hit like a second ambush, one that cut even deeper than bullets and explosions. For officers like Daniel and Maria, trust was everything. Trust in their training, their instincts, and most of all, their team. But now that trust was shattered. Someone, somewhere, had betrayed them. Maria told, "Captain, this wasn't random. Someone tipped them off. They knew exactly where we'd be." Captain told, "Lopez, you've been through a lot. You're injured and probably not thinking clearly. Let the detectives handle this." Maria told, "With all due respect, sir, we can't just sit back and wait. Someone in this precinct could be involved." Maria's words hung in the air, unspoken but undeniable. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was a threat to everything they stood for, everything they had fought to protect. And while the captain was reluctant to act, Maria and Daniel knew they couldn't let it go. Maria told, "I pulled the case files on the van. The plates were fake, no surprise there. But get this, the warehouse, it's owned by a shell company with ties to someone we've crossed paths with before. Daniel told Victor Reyes. Maria, yeah, we busted his drug operation 2 years ago, put half his crew in prison, looks like he didn't forget. The pieces were falling into place. The ambush wasn't random, it was revenge. Victor Reyes, a name they hadn't spoken in years, had come back with a vengeance, but how had he known where they'd be? How had he gotten so close? Maria told, we can't trust anyone, Daniel. If someone in the precinct sold us out, we're on our own. Daniel told, then we do this ourselves. We find Reyes and we make him pay. The screen fades to black, the sound of a heartbeat monitor slowly fading out. Words appear on the screen, to be continued. The ambush was just the beginning, the betrayal ran deeper than they could have imagined, and the fight for survival had turned into a fight for justice. But as Daniel and Maria prepared to take matters into their own hands, one question loomed larger than the rest. Who could they trust when the enemy was closer than they thought? Despite the wounds they carried, both physical and emotional, Daniel and Maria refused to give up. The ambush had left them battered, but not broken, and now, in the quiet of the hospital room, they worked together to find the one thing they needed most, a lead, something to tip the scales back in their favor. Maria told, there, that's it. Daniel told, that's Reyes' crew, no doubt about it. Maria told, it gets better. I cross-referenced precinct records with known associates of Reyes. One of them, Marcus Vega, was released on parole 2 months ago. Guess who signed off on the paperwork? It was the break they had been waiting for. Sergeant David Carter, a trusted member of their precinct, a man they had worked with for years. But now his name was tied to Reyes' operation, a betrayal that cut deeper than any wound they had suffered that night. Maria told, Carter knew where we'd be. He had access to the dispatch logs, to everything. He is the one who sold us out, Daniel. Daniel told, and he's going to lead us to Reyes. The pieces of the puzzle were finally coming together. Reyes had orchestrated the ambush, but Carter had been the one to open the door. It was a betrayal that could have cost them their lives, but now it was also their way forward. If they could expose Carter, they could get to Reyes, and maybe, just maybe, turn the tide. Detective Mitchell told, I heard what happened on Palmer Street. I'm glad you two made it out. Maria told, Erin, we need your help. Off the record, there's something going on in the precinct, something rotten. We think Carter's working with Reyes, Detective Mitchell told. That's a big accusation. You have proof? Daniel told, not enough to go public, but we have enough to start asking the right questions. We can't do this alone, Erin. Detective Mitchell told. I mean, but if we're going after Carter, we have to be smart. One wrong move and he'll bury this before we even get close. For the first time since the ambush, Daniel and Maria felt the faintest glimmer of hope. They had an ally, someone they could trust. But the fight was far from over. Exposing Carter would be dangerous, and going after Reyes would be even worse. Still, for the first time, they weren't alone. They had a lead, they had a plan, but the road ahead would test them in ways they couldn't yet imagine. The betrayal had shaken their trust, but it had also ignited something stronger, resolve. The fight wasn't over, not yet, and for Daniel and Maria, hope was enough to keep them going. The plan was risky, but it was all they had. With Mitchell's help, Daniel and Maria had uncovered enough evidence to prove that Sergeant David Carter was working with Victor Reyes. They had tracked Carter to this meeting, an exchange with one of Reyes' men. If they could catch him in the act, they'd have everything they needed to take him down. But the danger was as real as ever. One wrong move, and it wouldn't just be the case that ended here, it would be their lives. Daniel, Maria, and Mitchell crouched behind a nearby car, watching the scene unfold through binoculars. Daniel's grip tightens on the handle of his weapon. Daniel told, that's Reyes' guy. No doubt about it, Maria told. We need to get closer. If we can record the exchange, it's over for Carter. Mitchell. Stay low. We can't let them see us. Every second felt like an hour as they watched the meeting unfold. Carter handed over a thick envelope, cash most likely. In return, the man handed him a small USB drive. Whatever was on that drive, it was enough to prove Carter's involvement with Reyes. It was the evidence they needed, but getting it wouldn't be easy. Carter was no fool. He had survived in the force for years by trusting his instincts, and now those instincts were telling him that something was off. The slightest mistake, the smallest sound, and everything would unravel. Carter told, "Who's there?" Tattooed man told, "Relax, it's just me." The clock was ticking. If they waited too long, Carter and Reyes' men would leave and the chance to stop them would vanish. But making a move now meant risking everything. It was a decision that had to be made in seconds, a decision that could change everything. Just as Maria raises her phone to start recording, a sharp beep cuts through the air. She freezes, her face paling as she glances down at her phone's screen, a low battery warning flashing in bright red. Tattooed man told, "What was that?" Carter told, "We've got company." Spread out. The plan had fallen apart in an instant. There was no time to think, no time to strategize. Carter and Reyes' men were on high alert, and Daniel, Maria, and Mitchell had no choice but to act. Daniel told, "Freeze, police, drop your weapons." Carter told, "You don't know what you're getting into, Hayes." Daniel told, "I know exactly what I'm getting into. Drop the gun, Carter." It was a standoff, a moment where everything hung in the balance. For years, Carter had been a trusted member of the precinct, a man Daniel had worked beside countless times. But now they stood on opposite sides of the law, their weapons drawn and their trust shattered. Maria told, "Stay down." Daniel told, "Don't do it, Carter. Don't make this worse." It was over. Carter had surrendered and Reyes' man was in custody. For the first time in days, Daniel and Maria felt the weight begin to lift. The betrayal had been exposed, the evidence secured. Justice, it seemed, was finally within reach. Mitchell told, "You can make this easier on yourself, Carter. Tell us where Reyes is and maybe you'll walk out of this with a deal." Maria told, "He's not going to talk. Reyes has him too scared to say a word." Daniel told, "But we've got the drive. That's enough to bring Reyes down." Carter's silence didn't matter. The USB drive contained everything they needed: financial records, communications, and a detailed plan of Reyes' operation. It was enough to secure a warrant, enough to finally bring Reyes to justice. Maria told, "We did it. We took him down." Daniel told, "Not just yet. Reyes is still out there. But we'll get him, one way or another." Maria told, "You sound like a guy who doesn't know how to quit." Daniel told, "Maybe I don't." The fight wasn't over, not completely, but for the first time, Daniel and Maria felt like they were one step ahead. The betrayal had nearly destroyed them, but it had also reignited their resolve. And as the city woke up around them, they knew one thing for certain: no matter how dark it got, there would always be a glimmer of hope. What would you do if someone you trusted betrayed you? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to hit that like button if you enjoyed the story and subscribe to our channel for more gripping tales like this one. Your support means everything to us.